I was 62 years old when my daughter looked me dead in the eye, raised her champagne glass, and wished for my disappearance. We were sitting in a dimly lit, overpriced steakhouse downtown. It was Sarah's 35th birthday. I had paid the deposit for the private table, just as I had paid for the custom cake, the vintage wine, and the very roof over her head for the past 3 years. Sarah and her husband, Greg, had moved into my 4-bedroom suburban home under the guise of saving for a down payment. Instead, they leased 2 luxury SUVs, went on annual vacations to the Bahamas, and slowly relegated me to the role of the live-in maid. I spent my days doing their laundry, cooking their meals, and tiptoeing around my own living room while they hosted their friends. I tolerated the eye rolls, the heavy sighs when I asked a simple question, and the way they treated my home like a free hotel. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Then came the toast. Sarah stood up, tapping her spoon against her crystal glass. Her friends quieted down. She smiled that practiced, camera-ready smile she saved for social media. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her gaze sweeping the table before landing heavily on me. "People always ask what I want for my birthday at this age. They say you should focus on peace and removing toxic energy." She tilted her head, her smile turning brittle. "So, if I could have one perfect gift tonight, it would be this, Mom. The best gift would be if you left my life." A few of her friends chuckled awkwardly, assuming it was a dark joke. Greg smirked, swirling the wine in his glass. I sat perfectly still. My heart didn't shatter. I didn't burst into tears or cause a scene. I just looked at the woman I had raised, noticing the absolute lack of warmth in her eyes. I stood up from my chair, reached into my purse, and placed a crisp $100 bill on the table to cover the tip. "Happy birthday, Sarah," I replied softly. I turned on my heel and walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, the house was painfully quiet. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows. The pristine countertops I scrubbed every night. Usually, by 7 a.m. on a Sunday, I was flipping pancakes or frying bacon, preparing a heavy breakfast for Sarah and Greg. Not today. I brewed a single cup of black coffee for myself, enjoying the bitter, strong taste. I sat at the kitchen island, opened my laptop, and began the process of untangling my life from theirs. First, I logged into my banking portal. 3 years ago, I had opened a joint household account with Sarah, depositing a generous amount each month to cover groceries, utilities, and emergency repairs. Over time, I noticed charges for expensive hair salons, boutique clothing stores, and golf fees appearing on the statement. I had turned a blind eye, avoiding the conflict. I clicked a few buttons and transferred the entire remaining balance, nearly $8,000, into my private, individual savings account. Then, I navigated to the credit card portal. I was the primary account holder on a premium card Sarah kept in her wallet for household emergencies. I reported the card as lost and requested a new one be sent to a P.O. box. I planned to open the following day. Upstairs, I heard the heavy thud of footsteps. Greg was awake. A moment later, Sarah's voice echoed down the hallway, complaining about a headache. I calmly closed my laptop, took a sip of my coffee, and waited. Sarah shuffled into the kitchen, wearing a silk robe I had bought her last Christmas. She glared at the empty stove, her brow furrowing. "Where is breakfast? We have friends coming over at noon to watch the game." "I am not cooking," I answered, not looking up from my mug. She let out a dramatic sigh. "Fine. I'll just go to the bakery and pick up some pastries. Try to be useful and tidy up the living room before they get here." I just smiled, faintly. Have a safe trip. She grabbed her keys and stormed out the door. She had absolutely no idea that the plastic card in her wallet was now completely useless. 20 minutes later, the front door slammed open. Sarah marched into the kitchen, her face flushed with anger, clutching her leather purse so tightly her knuckles were white. My card declined, she shouted, throwing her keys onto the counter. I had to stand there like an idiot while the cashier tried it 3 times. Did you forget to pay the bill again? I never forget to pay my bills, I replied, my voice steady. I closed the joint account, and I canceled that credit card. You are 35 years old. If you want pastries, you will use your own money to buy them. Greg wandered into the kitchen, scratching his stomach, looking confused. What's going on? Where is the food? Your mother canceled the credit card, Sarah snapped, pointing a manicured finger at me. She is throwing a tantrum because of a little joke I made at dinner last night. It wasn't a joke, Sarah, I stated simply. You asked for a gift. I am merely preparing it. I stood up, rinsed my coffee mug in the sink, and walked past them. By the way, I am no longer cleaning the common areas. The vacuum is in the hall closet. Over the next 2 days, I methodically altered the landscape of the house. I changed the Wi-Fi password, downgrading the service to a basic package that barely supported my email, let alone Greg's high-speed gaming and their 4K streaming. When Greg complained the internet was broken, I merely shrugged and suggested he buy his own router. I stopped buying their expensive almond milk, premium steaks, and specialized coffees. The refrigerator slowly emptied, leaving only my basic necessities on the bottom shelf. I washed only my own plates and my own clothes. The laundry basket in the hallway began to overflow. They thought I was just being petty. They thought I would eventually break, apologize, and return to my role as the silent provider. They severely underestimated a woman who had finally decided her own peace was worth more than a forced relationship. On Wednesday morning, while Sarah and Greg were at their corporate jobs, a black sedan pulled into my driveway. A young man in a sharp suit stepped out, holding a clipboard. His name was David, and he represented a local real estate investment group that bought properties for cash. In as-is condition, I welcomed him inside. I owned this house outright. The deed was entirely in my name. A safety net my late husband and I had worked tirelessly to build. I had no intention of dealing with real estate agents, staging the house, or hosting open houses where Sarah and Greg would inevitably discover my plan and cause a scene. I needed a clean, fast exit. David walked through the rooms, noting the updated kitchen and the well-maintained roof. It's a beautiful property. Mrs. Cooper, why the rush to sell? I am downsizing. I answered simply, I want a quick closing. No contingencies. He ran some numbers on his tablet. Because you want a cash offer with a 10-day close, we will come in below market value. I can offer you $420,000, wire transferred directly to your account next Friday. It was $50,000 less than what I could get on the open market. But the speed and the secrecy were worth every single penny. Print the agreement, I instructed. After David left, I picked up my phone and called my son, Julian. He lived in a quiet mountain town in Colorado. Unlike Sarah, Julian had always been independent, kind, and respectful. We spoke often, though I had kept the true extent of Sarah's behavior hidden from him, not wanting to cause sibling rivalry. Mom, are you okay? Julian asked, picking up on the second ring. I am perfectly fine, I said. Julian, I am selling the house. I want to move to Colorado. Do you think you could help me find a small apartment near you? Julian paused for a long moment. Then, I heard him exhale a deep breath of relief. It is about time. Mom, I'll go look at a perfect little cottage down the street from my place this afternoon. Pack your bags. Packing 30 years of a life without alerting the two people living down the hall requires discipline. I started with the items that held no sentimental value. I boxed up old winter coats, unread books, and outdated decor, quietly loading them into my car while Sarah and Greg were watching television. I drove to the local charity shop and donated them. The house slowly began to echo, subtly stripped of its history. For the things I wanted to keep, family photo albums, my favorite quilt, a small collection of vintage jewelry. I packed them into 3 sturdy suitcases hidden in the back of my walk-in closet. I didn't need furniture. The money from the house sale would easily cover outfitting a new, smaller space. Tension in the house escalated, though it remained entirely one-sided. Sarah stomped around, slamming cabinet doors when she found them empty. Greg muttered under his breath when he had to wear wrinkled shirts to work because I was no longer ironing them. On Friday evening, Sarah marched into my bedroom without knocking. Mom, the cleaning service didn't show up today. I called them, and they said the account was terminated. That is correct, I replied, folding a sweater. I canceled it. Well, who is going to clean the bathrooms? She demanded, crossing her arms. I suggest you buy some bleach and a good sponge. I noted, placing the sweater in a drawer. She let out a sharp, mocking laugh. You are being absolutely ridiculous. You think this little strike of yours is going to teach me a lesson? You're just making yourself look bitter. I turned to face her, maintaining my calm composure. I am not trying to teach you anything. Sarah, I am simply matching your energy. You wanted me out of your life. I am just removing the parts of my life that you take for granted. She rolled her eyes and walked out, leaving the door wide open. I quietly walked over and closed it until the latch clicked. The silence in my room felt different now. It felt like a countdown. The weekend arrived, bringing my final administrative tasks. I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, systematically cutting the remaining cords. I logged into the cellular provider portal. For years, I had kept Sarah and Greg on my family plan, paying their exorbitant data overages without complaint. I selected their phone numbers, clicked the Release Liability button, and removed them from my account. They would have 48 hours to set up their own billing, or their screens would go dark. Next was the auto insurance. Their 2 luxury SUVs were bundled under my policy to get a multi-car discount. I called the agent and instructed him to drop their vehicles effective immediately. At noon, Sarah came downstairs, staring at her phone screen with a furious expression. Did you touch my phone plan? I just got a text saying my service will be disconnected on Monday. I removed you from my account. I answered calmly, sipping a glass of water. You both have excellent jobs. Paying a phone bill is a standard adult responsibility. This is financial abuse, she screamed, her face turning red. I actually laughed. It was a short, genuine sound of amusement. Financial abuse is rent-free in your mother's house, driving luxury cars, and expecting a 62-year-old widow to buy your groceries while you insult her in public. Set up your own account. Sarah, Greg came down the stairs, catching the end of the argument. Hey, let's just calm down. We're going to that wine tasting retreat this weekend anyway. We can sort out the phone stuff on Monday. He looked at me, attempting a charming smile. You know, Bethany, a little harmony would be nice around here. Harmony is exactly what I am seeking, I replied. They packed their overnight bags and left for the weekend, completely oblivious to the fact that my car was already packed with my 3 suitcases, and the title to the house was sitting in a manila envelope on my passenger seat. Tomorrow was closing day. The illusion was about to shatter permanently. Monday morning arrived with a crisp, cool breeze. Sarah and Greg had returned late Sunday night, exhausted from their trip, and left for work early. The house was empty. At 10 a.m., I drove to the title agency downtown. The meeting room was quiet and professional. David, from the investment group, was there, along with a notary. I sat at the polished wooden table and reviewed the final documents. There was no hesitation, no lingering doubt. I signed my name on the dotted lines, transferring ownership of the property where I had raised my children, where I had mourned my husband, and where I had slowly lost my dignity. Within an hour, the transaction was complete. I checked my banking app. The massive wire transfer had cleared into my private account. I drove back to the house one last time. I walked through the empty rooms, feeling nothing but a profound sense of relief. I didn't leave the place a mess, but I didn't deep clean it either. I walked into the kitchen and placed my set of house keys on the granite island. Beside the keys, I left a single piece of paper. It wasn't a long, emotional letter. It wasn't a plea for understanding or a list of grievances. It was a simple, factual note. Sarah, you asked for the gift of my absence. I have granted it. The house was sold this morning. The new owners will be in touch regarding your timeline to vacate. Do not try to contact me. I walked out the front door. Locking it behind me with the spare key, I dropped into the mailbox. I got into my car, put it in drive, and pulled out of the neighborhood. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just watched the road ahead, feeling the heavy, suffocating weight of the past 3 years lift from my shoulders with every mile I drove westward. I was finally disappearing. The drive to Colorado took 2 days. I took my time, staying in a quiet motel, eating at roadside diners, and listening to the radio. I hadn't turned on my cell phone since I left the title agency. For the first time in decades, nobody needed anything from me. When I crossed the state line into Colorado, the towering mountains and crisp air felt like a physical reset. Julian was waiting for me outside a small, charming cottage nestled near a pine forest. He ran up and wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight. You actually did it. Julian smiled, grabbing 2 of my suitcases. I did, I replied, breathing in the scent of pine. And I feel lighter than I have in years. The cottage was perfect. It was small, with hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, and a porch that looked out over the valley. It was entirely mine. Julian had stocked the fridge with basics and bought a beautiful bouquet of wildflowers for the kitchen table. Over the next few days, I established a new routine. I woke up when I wanted to. I drank my coffee on the porch, watching the deer graze in the distance. I went for walks, visited the local farmers market, and spent my evenings reading books I had meant to read for years. I didn't have to clean up anyone else's messes. I didn't have to absorb anyone's passive-aggressive insults. My finances were completely secure. The money from the house sale, combined with my late husband's pension, meant I could live comfortably in this quiet town for the rest of my life. I had taken back absolute control of my environment and my resources. On my 5th day in the cottage, Julian came over for dinner. As we cleared the plates, he looked at me carefully. Mom, you know you can't keep your phone off forever. You have to face the fallout eventually. I smiled, wiping down the counter. I'm not avoiding it. Julian, I just wanted to enjoy the peace first. I'll turn it on tonight. That evening, I sat by the fireplace, plugged my phone into the charger, and held down the power button. The screen lit up, and immediately, the device began to vibrate violently. It buzzed for 3 solid minutes as notifications flooded the screen. There were 42 missed calls, 37 text messages, and 5 voicemails. Almost all of them were from Sarah, with a few from Greg. I opened the text messages and read them methodically, feeling entirely detached, as if I were reading a story about strangers. Monday, 6:00 p.m. Mom. Where are you? The house is completely dark. Monday, 6:15 p.m. I found the note. Is this some kind of sick joke? Call me back right now. Tuesday, 9:00 a.m. My phone got shut off. I had to use Greg's phone to text you. Turn my service back on. You are ruining my life. Wednesday, 4:00 p.m. A man just showed up with a property deed. He changed the front door lock and gave us a 30-day notice to vacate. Mom, please, we don't have enough saved for a deposit anywhere nice. Where did you go Thursday? 10:00 a.m. This is illegal. You can't just sell the house from under us, Greg is furious. Call me immediately. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. They had 2 excellent incomes. They had simply squandered their money on luxuries while I subsidized their basic needs. The reality of adult life was finally knocking on their door, and I was no longer standing in the doorway to shield them from it. I deleted the voicemails without listening to them. I didn't need to hear her voice cracking with manufactured panic. I typed out a single, precise reply. I gave you exactly what you asked for in front of your friends. I will not be funding your lifestyle anymore. You have 30 days to find a new place. I suggest you cancel the Bahamas trip. I hit send. Her response came through almost instantly. Sarah, how can you be so cruel? I am your daughter. You're supposed to help us. I stared at the screen. For years, she had used that exact phrase as a weapon, demanding endless sacrifices while offering nothing but disdain in return. I tapped the contact settings on my phone, scrolled down to the bottom of the screen, and pressed block caller. I did the same for Greg. The screen went quiet. The digital tether was finally severed. I set the phone on this coffee table and walked out onto my porch. The Colorado night was freezing, the sky exploding with brilliant stars. I wrapped my favorite quilt tightly around my shoulders, breathing in the sharp, icy air. I was not a victim. I had not let myself be destroyed by a toxic environment, nor had I wasted years fighting a battle of words with someone committed to misunderstanding me. I had simply assessed the situation, packed my bags, and removed my presence and my resources from a place where they were no longer respected. I had vanished from her life. But more importantly, I had finally reappeared in my own. The next morning, I met Julian for coffee at a small cafe downtown. We laughed. We made plans for the upcoming holidays, and we enjoyed each other's company without the looming shadow of family drama. My life was simple. My boundaries were ironclad, and my peace was non-negotiable. If you are watching this, and you are exhausted from giving your everything to people who treat you like nothing, remember this: you do not need permission to walk away. You do not need a massive argument, and you do not need them to understand. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is silently pack your bags. Take control of what is yours, and grant them the gift of your absence. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and take back control of your own story.